I think we're ready to get going, everybody. So if I could just invite you all to take your seats, make sure you've got your lunch. It's really lovely to see everybody here today, and welcome to this event to celebrate women in business. Let me start by introducing myself. My name is Ruth Sloss. I am a leadership and executive coach. I work with individuals to develop their corporate careers, develop their leadership skills. I work with organizations to develop talent. My background is media, telco, senior leadership roles, and in my corporate career, I actually work with a lot of businesses here in the park, so I'm really familiar with all of the organisations here, and it's lovely to be here. You'll find me on the Enjoy Work app, actually. I'm under concierge services, so please do look me up. I am really passionate about championing and empowering women. I'm currently chair of the Women in Telecoms Career Development Group, and I work with various other organisations across different industries and sectors to support women. But why is this important? Do we even need to? I mean, here in the park, we actually have 57% female workforce, which is a fantastic stat. But there is no getting away from the fact that we do still face challenge. A few bits of data for you. At the moment, there are only 8 female CEOs in the FTSE 100. There was a report last year by the government's Women and Equalities Committee around female entrepreneurs, and it established that in 2024, only 2% of venture capital funding went to female founders, with 80% going to businesses with male founders. It also established that if female founders were backed to the same extent as male founders, it would be worth $310 billion in growth to the UK economy. There was also a report last year, the Lovelace report, that looked at systemic barriers to women in tech, and it showed that women were leaving tech in increasing numbers and at a cost of between 2 to 3.5 billion a year. And this, of course, at a time when I'm sure you're all aware the government have launched really ambitious targets to grow and scale the UK's digital and AI workforces. So it's really, really important that we provide ways to champion women, because it's not just an ethical tick box, it's really vital to the growth of the UK economy and the success of organisations. So what can we do to do this? There are a couple of things that we can do, and what we are seeking to do with our event here. One thing is we can provide opportunities for women to network, to grow their networks, and I really hope that you take the opportunity today to introduce yourself to someone new. Make a new contact, grow your network. Another thing we can do is provide really inspiring women to learn from. And our guest today is someone who is a woman that has smashed it out the park as both a female entrepreneur and a woman in tech. So please welcome Michelle Kennedy. Thank you. Now, Michelle, can I start by asking you to introduce yourself, please?
Yeah. Thank you so much, Ruth. That was amazing. I am Michelle. I'm the founder of Peanut. Peanut is a social network which connects women across different life stages. So women who are going through their infertility journey or fertile health, women who are pregnant, new mothers, mothers of toddlers, tweens and beyond, and women who are going through perimenopause and menopause. So really thinking about connecting women at those key life stages with one another to help them find community, to help them find content, and to help them find connection and support.
Thank you. And I'm conscious that you have a really rich career around Peanut and also several phases before your career. In my mind, your career almost splits into 3 sections: your work as a corporate lawyer, your work now as an entrepreneur, and some recent things you've been doing around funding and around campaigning. And I want to explore those phases. I want to explore challenge as well as success, because to my point, we can all learn from challenge and overcoming challenge. And we're going to have time at the end for Q&A as well. So please do think now about questions you have for Michelle, because this is a great opportunity to pick the brains of someone who's had a really rich career. But diving in, now you began as a corporate lawyer at Mishcon de Roya. Can you tell us about how that experience started to build and shape you?
So I think that for anyone who is a lawyer or knows a lawyer, I think that probably there are 2 key components of my legal training and legal career that really shaped who I am and what I do now. And the first is discipline, right? There is just no way that you will be able to fake the discipline it needs in an M&A situation in a corporate law firm. We do work long hours. You are on transactions until 3 a.m. because the deal has to get done. You are dealing with sublime to ridiculous. So you might be negotiating a very important part of the sale agreement, and then you might also be drafting a part of the due diligence report, and then you might also be putting sticky tabs for people to sign in a completion meeting. And it is that kind of level of discipline. So from a discipline, hard work perspective, I would say that was the best grounding I could ask for. I think the second part that has really helped me is there's no document that scares me. There are many things that scare me, but it won't be a legal document. And I think that is probably different from some of my peers who are also founders or entrepreneurs who actually might be intimidated or daunted by what they see, by being presented with that shareholders agreement, by looking at things. And for me, I'm familiar with it. I know my way around it. I might find other parts more challenging, but that for me feels like, okay, I can do that part. Now I can free my mind and free my concerns and worries for a different part of the business. So I think that's where I've really got my grounding from it. And I loved being a lawyer. Like I really did enjoy my legal career. I don't know if I was the best lawyer, but I loved it. It shaped most definitely my approach. And everyone at the time honestly told me lawyers don't make good entrepreneurs, they're risk averse. And so it's true, you are trained to identify risk as a lawyer. And as an entrepreneur, I suppose you look for the risk and you do it anyway. But it definitely, for me and my own personal experience, has not hindered me or jeopardized me in any way. I feel like I know where the risks are. And I'm perhaps almost like attuned to the risks, and I can still lean in and do them. And that is not a negative to the legal training.
And that is really interesting because it taps into something, you speaking about risk, because in my mind, I do associate law, rightly or wrongly, with risk and with compliance and being risk averse. And it fascinated me that you then went on to jump into the world of tech, which I see as being totally different. And we're all familiar with the move fast and break things, and it feels so different. What led to that transition?
I had gone to work in-house for a client. So I was doing lots of M&A for one particular client. I went to work in-house for them, and they were doing much more consolidation. So I wasn't buying any more companies. I was basically trying to get all the companies to talk to each other, which was fine, but less exciting. And a lawyer that I used to work for reached out to me and said, look, there's this company, there's this young guy, he's built something amazing, it's a dating website. And I was like, no, my mum will kill me, no. And not, tech actually, even in London, wasn't what it is now. We weren't talking about tech in the way that we are now. We didn't have the ecosystem. I think Facebook had just opened an office here, for context, in terms of where we were. And so for me to go and join a kind of a dating website or a tech company felt very odd. But I met the founder and I loved what he was doing. It was absolutely, it's the most thrilling thing to walk into an office environment, which was unlike my office environment. It was 30 people with headphones on, writing code, drinking Red Bull, eating hula hoops. And I was like, what is this? No one in a suit. And it had 52 million users, and I'd never heard of it. Wow. And that for me was like, yeah, I want to build something that's got 52 million users. That sounds cool. And so that was the start of it. And so it really was by accident in that way. It was just a go and meet this founder and see what you think. And I went in and I started as the lawyer. I went in to build the legal function. And then because I am super nosy, curious is the nice way of saying it, I wanted to understand more. Like, what does that mean? Why do you do that? Who is that? Also, people tell you a lot of answers when you're the lawyer because they feel like they have to tell you everything. So I got to understand the business really, really well. And from then on, I started working side by side with the founder, and I became his deputy CEO. And that was really the start of this love affair with building in tech.
And when you talked there about going in and into that office with all the coders, my mind immediately pictures them all as being male.
They were actually,
Yeah. and you know, we think of tech as being a very male-dominant industry. You know, we've got the tech bros that are at the top of all of the various major players. I've just been watching Grayson Perry's AI program where he meets some of the people there and sort of talks about the male-centric issues and the bias that can go into AI. How have you found it being a woman working in the tech world?
So I think at the time that I joined Badoo, I was the only woman, certainly in kind of a senior position. And I think that the women that we had in the organization, there were few. And I was very aware of it, but I didn't feel anything other than that's okay because I'm just here to learn, or I'm just finding my way. It really didn't hit me. When it used to hit me was when I would go to another office, to go and meet someone at Meta or Facebook, to go into a conference, to walk into a situation where I was like, wow, there are actually no women here. And that does feel very excluding. There was something about it being in my own workplace that I almost didn't notice. It was when I started to look externally that I could really see it. And what that means is what we were building and what we had been building up until that point was pretty homogenous in terms of who it was appealing to. If you're building a consumer product and you're only taking one vantage point, guess what? You build for that vantage point. You don't change. So I think that that was very clear and evident. I do think we're better now. I think there is a huge shift. There has been a shift. Obviously, there are challenges now with a US government who doesn't support a DE&I mindset. That has reduced, again, the focus of big tech on those very, very important movements to get more women, more people of color into positions where we need diversity of thought. So that is challenging. We can't pretend it's not happening because it's setting us back. You know, it's taken us this long to get to this point, and that has set us back. But overall, in this country, I think that we are doing better. The government has just set up a UK Women in Tech workforce that it launched last week. It's a conversation that's still happening, and we have to be supportive of that. Anyone who's having the conversation, we have to celebrate and support that.
And that vantage point that you had as a woman, you've obviously then, if we move on to look at your work as an entrepreneur, you got the idea for your app Peanut when you just had your first son. And I have to say, this boggles my mind. I have this image of you like knee deep in nappies, baby vomit on your top. Okay, what I really need to do is launch an app.
Yeah.
I mean, you must be a stronger woman than me. I don't know.
It wasn't that, I promise, yeah.
Talk us through how you got the idea for Peanut and what it's about.
Yeah, so Badoo, a little recap on the Badoo story. So the Badoo story was this huge dating platform, and this was apps. So we're all very used to talking about apps now, but we didn't have even an app store at the time. So this was a web product, and it was mobile web. So very different landscape. And we started to build a mobile-first product, build a native product, but we really didn't have any success in the US market, and we really knew that we needed to. Tinder came out and really changed the game in terms of we had that feature on Badoo. It was really annoying that they came out and they made this product, whatever we think of it now, it looks stunning, right? Just from an objective tech perspective, the UI of Tinder was amazing. And we were like, oh, it's us, but better. And so we had to go quickly to try and think about how to address that or redress and reclaim our position. And long story short, that became Bumble. So we had our answer to the US market in particular, and Whitney Wolf headed that up. So that was amazing. So we had that positioning. So my day job had become Bumble, Badoo. I loved everything we were building. And I had a 6-month-old. So my life was very different. Kind of at night, I was searching forums for answers at like 3 a.m. about like, why won't he sleep? Or is it normal? Or am I normal? Or a whole variety of things. And then going into the office the next day and like building really cool, great branding and so on. And so what I knew is I needed a product for me. None of the products out there served me. And what I also knew is there was an entire generation of women about to come after me who were having babies. And their expectation was they would have a great mobile first, intuitive, stylish looking product that reflected them. And that didn't exist. And so I probably, somewhere between a mix of like naivety and just that kind of, I need it and I'm going to build it and I'll be really unhappy if someone builds it before me, attitude that led me. It took me a year and a half after that, by the way. So I really didn't even start thinking about Peanut until my son was 2 and a bit. So I don't want to like give anyone like false expectations. I wasn't that person with the nappies. But he was getting bigger, and the bigger the kid, the bigger the problem. I actually just needed more women in my life more than ever. It wasn't like I knew everything already. I actually needed it more. And so he was starting preschool, and I was like, this is the moment. I'm doing it. And I spoke to my husband, because I didn't do it on my own. It's never exactly how the story presents. And I was like, I think I'm going to do this thing, and life is going to change for us. We've got a mortgage, we've got bills, we've got a baby. But if I don't do it, I won't know what I could do alone. And so that was it. So in 2017, we launched Peanut.
And what was the biggest challenge in that journey of getting it up and running?
There's so many challenges. So the first challenge actually was my ego. I just have to be really honest about that. I'd gone from being really senior in a business where I had a great life. I loved my life. I traveled. I really enjoyed the position that I had in the company. I just like enjoyed the autonomy. And all of a sudden, I was alone. I didn't have any team around me. I couldn't hire anyone that I used to work with or worked for me because I had these huge restrictive covenants. And it was humbling because I was the people. There were no people. It was just me. So it would go from like, okay, I'm out fundraising, and then I'm conducting like user interviews, and then I'm conducting interviews to try and hire people, but I'm selling to them because all of a sudden, who wants to work for just me? And so that ego and that feeling and that dynamic, that was an adjustment. That was hard. So that was the first challenge. I think the next challenge was hiring, finding the right people, making sure that you got people who were excited about the journey, what you were going to build, believed in the mission. And based on what I've just said, you need a really good mix in your team. I needed men and women to build Peanut. If I just built Peanut with only women, the vantage point and the expertise and what we built wouldn't have been the same. I needed everyone on the journey. So trying to think about the right dynamics of that was a challenge. And then the third challenge you've already hit on, which is 2% of venture capital goes to women. And this was 2017. And I was going out to pitch a product which was women only. And at that moment, only focused on mums. And every man I pitched to was like, but you're good at dating, like maybe a new dating app, or, are you sure? Do women need this? I don't think my wife, assistant, whatever, needs another social media platform. And it was quite a challenging conversation. I think we've made loads of progress since then, by the way, but that was incredibly hard at the start.
Yeah, that is disappointing to hear. But yeah. It's an interesting point, and I'm going to just touch on something briefly. That point that you made there about having men as well as women working on the app and those different vantage points. And I think it's a really pertinent point, because Peanut is brilliant that we have an app like Peanut to provide a safe space for women to have conversations. I think we need that. Michelle and I were talking earlier, and I was complaining about my perimenopause symptoms, and we need to be able to talk about these things. But I'm also conscious that I was at an event recently where an older gentleman shared with me he had a daughter and granddaughters, and he was really inspired to understand the challenges women face in the workplace, so he could do what he could to enable women to overcome them. And I thought, what a lovely man. But it also made me really cognizant of the fact of how do we balance those two things? How do we provide safe spaces for women, but also ensure that we're bringing men along in the conversation and engaging men as well?
So wildly important, if we take it out of men and women and we think about interests, when I was building Peanut, I needed a mixture of people who were, for example, really interested in gaming. Because gaming is a really interesting mindset and objective when you're thinking about building a product, because you're thinking about engagement, you're thinking about retention, you're thinking about sticky hooks, you're thinking about what keeps people there, you're thinking about reward versus loss. So all of those feelings, that's a really, really important part of building a social product. That needed a gaming mentality. On the next side, I needed someone who had a mentality who was thinking about localization. What makes this feel like it's a product for you right here, right now? How do I connect you with people who are based around you? That needs someone who's been thinking about logistic challenges, like a Deliveroo. So you need a different mix of all these different mindsets. So if you think about it now in terms of men and women, you need people who have had different experiences. The men who are saying, actually, we want to support, we're an ally, we understand that we're not part of that conversation, but we need to have that conversation happening. And then you need women who are saying, this is my experience, how do I get it supported? How do I get the right and relevant eyeballs on this content, or whatever it might be? So you do need both. And if you take it out of gender and you put it into interests, for example, all of a sudden you see why it's important. So then you can put it back into the gender lens and say, oh yeah, of course it's important to have that mix. But I think sometimes we lose that because we're so busy saying, this should exist for everyone. There is a space for everyone, most definitely. But to get the best possible product, you need a variety of vantage points, I think.
And I want to just skip on now to your recent work around venture capital funding yourself and campaign work. And as you said, that third challenge that you found when setting up Peanut was the lack of funding given to women. And through Peanut, you've now set up the microfund Start Her, which I think is fantastic to empower unrepresented founders. And you're also doing some campaigning work through Peanut as well. I'm curious because we've spoken about, that was one of the reasons that you began Start Her, I'm assuming the lack of funding. But from that Start Her work, and to your point earlier about men, or you being told, oh, can't you just do another dating app? Do you see the ideas being generated through Start Her, if they come from female businesses, as different to male-funded businesses?
So it's really interesting because the answer is yes to me, but obviously I have to say that I'm going to see a certain type of business because of who I am, because of what I've built. It informs who will come and apply to us for funding, right? We're going to always sway leaning towards social impact. We're always going to sway towards solving an issue. It's much less likely to be an enterprise SaaS product that comes to me, right? And that's not because women aren't building them. It's just that they're probably not coming to me. And so, yes, I do see women building for social impact. I do see women building for a generally a more consumer lens and solving a problem. But that, I don't think we should take that as a general rule. I think we should take that specific to me. I think that why something like Start Her is important is I remember when I was starting Peanut and people would say to me, why don't you just do a friends and family round? rather than going to VC. And I was like, what is that? And the friends and family round is going and asking your friends and family to invest in your business idea. I didn't have friends and family who could casually write me a 50K check. Good luck, Michelle, I hope it goes well. That was just not my world at all. That didn't exist to me. And so I was like, who is doing friends and family rounds? And what I discovered and understood is that if you are living in a certain part of California and you are a young guy who is studying at Harvard or Stanford or whatever, actually, you are frequently doing friends and family rounds because that is your environment and that is your ecosystem. I was like, well, this is crazy because no wonder the world is skewed to having development and innovation coming from that very specific part of the world, because it's like a club that we're not a part of, or certainly I wasn't a part of. And so I wanted to create a world where we could have an equivalent. So I'm not a VC fund, I wish. I can't write millions, but you can think of me as like your rich auntie who can write like a check and give you that first opportunity to do it. Because if we don't have more women who are able to insert themselves earlier in that ecosystem, what we won't have is more women building before they get onto the VC cycle, which is a whole different cycle. And we need that in order to have more women who have more successful outcomes, i.e. exits, to make money, to then be able to reinvest in the ecosystem. I don't only invest in women, I invest in male-led businesses too, but I think it's an important point that women need capital outcomes in order to have more money to put back into the ecosystem.
That's really interesting, and I hadn't really thought of it that way before, as such a cyclical.
Yeah.
I also wanted to touch on some of the campaigns that you've been doing through Peanut, because I think they're fascinating.
Yeah.
You've done campaigns to champion the use of the word matrescence, which I was horrified to say I wasn't really aware of until I read that campaign. Would you like to just tell people what matrescence means if they don't know?
Yeah, so matrescence is the experience, basically the biological, physical and psychological experience of becoming a mother. So think of it like adolescence or menopause. We have names for those two things, but we don't actually have one for what it takes to become a mother. If you scan the grey matter of a brain, you can tell whether someone has birthed and been a mother and had a mothering experience or not. And so it is a biological change. We can see the changes, we just don't name it. And if we don't name experiences, what happens is we don't lend our support systems in order to enable to support and help them. And so we must name the experience. Matrescence, by the way, was a phrase that was created in the 1970s and is still not in the Merriam-Webster dictionary. The Merriam-Webster dictionary is really important because that's on your phone or on any digital that you use. That's your spell check. So if you write matrescence on your phone, if you type it into a document, it's going to come up with that red squiggly line to say it's a typo. It's not a typo, it's a word, it's an experience. And so the campaign was around how to add matrescence to the dictionary.
And where do you get the ideas for the campaigns? Because I thought that was a great campaign, and also the More Joy Motherhood, which I thought really touched really well on the experience that, like, you know, I think we're conditioned to not really want to talk about the joys that people find in motherhood. Yeah. It feels almost, I don't know, I think a lot of women dumb that down. But where do these themes come from?
I'm really lucky in that I've got like the world's best listening tool. I just look at what women are talking about on Peanut, really, and that it's as simple as that. So women either talking about, last year when we did More Joy, loads of women talking about, I can't put this on my Instagram because people will say I'm smug, but my baby just smiled at me, or my baby just burped and laughed, or whatever it is, just these tiny moments of joy. And as a team, we were like, isn't that sad that people are embarrassed, that they feel smug, or that they can't talk about the joy of motherhood? We're only allowed to talk about the really hard-hitting issues, and we're only allowed to talk about how stressed we are and that we've got no childcare. Well, we know that. We're already doing that stuff. But actually, there are these beautiful moments. They're not the big moments. They're just these tiny little intimate moments of joy. And if we don't celebrate those, actually what happens is you start to feel quite lonely and quite isolated because you're feeling like you're suppressing what's really your lived experience. So More Joy was just about celebrating those tiny moments, and it was a beautiful campaign. And I loved doing it. And Matrescence was really about women saying, so I can't remember where I put my keys when I get in with the baby, but I am hearing her cry like all over the house. And it's like, well, actually, that's biology, because your brain reprioritizes. So your brain is geared towards hearing a baby cry when you're in that postpartum phase, and it will deprioritize things like where you put your keys, because in your brain's mind, it's about survival of the baby rather than organization. So that's a biological experience, and so we started to see lots of those different types of conversations, and that was a conversation in the office where I was like, what actually is that called? And then a campaign was built from it.
Before we move to questions from the audience, so just a couple of questions to wrap up. And I guess one thing that I'm conscious that you've navigated a massive amount of change in your career.
Yeah.
And from working with people on career development, I really noticed that people struggle to understand how to navigate like from one role to another, let alone from one industry to another. So I'd love to hear from you. If you've got any tips or advice that you would give to people who are looking to make a transition in their own careers.
Yeah, I think that your own inner critic is the one that needs to be silenced the most when you're making change. No one else is judging you as harshly as you are judging yourself. No one. Actually, everyone's just interested in themselves anyway, so no one's really thinking about you at that moment at all, which was really hard for me to take, because every time I'm doing something, I feel like I should know the answer. Of course I don't know the answer. That's why I'm learning or doing it. And so the ability to try and turn off that inner critic and focus on the outcome, which is, I want the outcome to be that I learn something new, that I've tried something new, that I fail at something new. It's really just feedback for yourself. So if you can turn off the voice that's saying you can't, you should already know, that's not good enough, and turn that voice into just getting some feedback, just learning, I think that's a hugely helpful way of approaching change. But it also means that then you start to become more curious, because you don't mind getting the answer wrong. You don't mind feeling like you're out of your depth, because actually you're just trying to get data and get that feedback loop. And honestly, I think working with engineers helps me so much on this. Like, engineers approach everything as if like we're going to have a bash at it and we probably aren't going to get it right, and then we'll get to the right answer. And for me, I'm like, oh, wow, aren't you worried, scared, nervous that you'll get it wrong? And it's just such a completely different learning mentality, where they're like, well, we'll get it wrong 8 times before we get it right. Or a bug will appear in this piece of code, and we'll just go and unpick that and solve it. It's never the end of the world. And to me, it always felt like the end of the world getting something wrong, and it's not like that at all.
I love that thought of let's just have a bash at it.
Yeah.
See what happens.
Have a go.
What's the worst that can happen?
Let's hack something together is like a phrase that I hear every week. And I'm like, the perfectionist in me is like, something together, what are you talking about? And actually it's perfect. It's just start now and do something.
And finally, is there anything that you have learned from being an entrepreneur that our audience here who are working in the corporate world could take as a learning and apply to their corporate careers?
Yeah, so I think that you're probably doing it every day anyway. But the most probably transferable skill is around people and networks. I totally never understood, and no one ever told me, honestly, and that sounds like a silly thing to say, but no one ever really highlighted to me how important a network is. Everyone that you meet in any part of your corporate career might be someone that you need to engage with at a later stage. That might be because you need a supplier for an event. That might be because you're moving into a new organization. You want to get a sense check of whether it's the organization for you. That might be because you're going to do a women in work kind of setup, and you want to start. Whatever it is, that network starts the day you start work. In fact, it starts way before that. It starts the day you start university or further education or whatever it is, where you're in a group of people who you didn't know before, because those people go out. And when they go out, as long as you've got connections with them, and you can start to re-find each other, your network becomes bigger and bigger. And that importance of network, I started in my 30s, and that was late, and I wish I'd have done it much, much earlier. So you're probably already doing it in your corporate life, but definitely like do it now, start today.
I think that's excellent advice, and I think it's actually something that historically men have done a lot better than women.
Yeah.
And I think we need to catch up.
Yeah. But it's a tale as old as time. Like even as early as the Masons, like this was something that men were doing, and we didn't know. I didn't know anything about it. So this is something where, you know, we do need to be thinking about how to build connectivity and how to build networks. And, you know, networking events always felt a bit cringy and a bit awkward. Well, it doesn't have to be that. It can actually just be the place that you get a coffee from every day when you see that other person there and you strike up a conversation, and all of a sudden that person becomes that one key to unlocking a sales deal or an investment or whatever it might be. I think it's super important to build networks.
Right, we're going to go to questions now. So Jason has a roving mic at the background. Does anybody have a question for Michelle? Yes, Jason at the front here. I'll just ask you to speak into the microphone because otherwise they can't get the recording.
Hi, can everyone hear me? Yeah. Cool. I wanted to ask about your focus and your drive, not on your last answer, but the answer before where you're talking about turning off your inner voice. Parts of that sounded to me like a kind of combination between, it could be for other people a case of fear or procrastination, and you might think it's procrastination, but actually it's fear, which you need to turn off, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So how did you stay focused or bring on your drive and kind of differentiate between the several, if that makes sense?
I think it's such a great question, and you're right, it is largely fear, and it is a lot of fear. So I go back to the point that I made when I started Peanut. I had little fear because I was naive, so I didn't really know what the worst was. And then obviously you experience the worst and you're like, wow, that is so rough. I don't know if I can do it again. And then it gets even rougher and you're like, oh my God. But you're in it then and there's nothing you can do. And then it stabilizes. And so then you're into like calmer waters. And then it's harder to take risk again. And it's harder to kind of feel the fear and do it anyway, or whatever the expression is. It's much, much more difficult. And I can procrastinate like the best of them. Like we all have that moment where we're like, this is kind of okay, and maybe like just keep in this safe water. And I suppose the only thing that I can say is every time I've taken the leap and tried, I've always failed at least 90% of what I've tried, but maybe just like a couple of percent sticks, and it's worth it for that part. And so it is a little bit of like keeping myself accountable to the fact that, okay, this isn't great, but if I do it and it works, could be amazing. I've just hired someone really senior in the business, and it's the first time I'm like relinquishing a lot of control to someone else. It's really hard. It's the hardest thing I've ever done at Peanut, because I see her doing stuff and I'm like, oh, I wouldn't do it like that. But you know what? It's better, isn't it? Right? Because if I wouldn't do it like that, that was kind of the point. So it is hard, but I procrastinated over that move for a really long time before I was like, Michelle, to change, we've got to change. Same input denotes same output. Like change the input, change the output. And I have that on a little sticky on my computer. Like doing the same every day will give me the same every day. And that helps me a little bit.
I like that. Doing the same every day will give you the same every day. That's very, very true.
So true.
Yeah.
And then you look at it, and every time I look at it, I'm like, right, okay, change.
Do something different.
Do something different, yeah.
Anybody else have any other questions?
I guess my question was a little bit around how you get young children into that techie environment. When you speak to young kids and you ask them what they want to be and they're coming through school, they want to be influencers now and they want to be all this terrible stuff. And I feel like in order for them to, get into a job where they're building or writing code, it has to start really quite early. But they're never going to understand what that looks like because they're never going to understand what it is to build something like that. So in order to change the shift, sort of the conversation you were having right at the beginning, how do you actually shift the young minds of young girls so that they're growing up into a world where they think that's possible and where it's an option?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest, actually, we were talking about it before, is around confidence to fail, I think. So in going back to that engineering mentality and mindset, you have to be confident to fail in order to get to the right answer. And we know that young girls in particular don't have confidence to fail, right? We carry around from a very young age the feeling of, I must be the good girl, I must get it right. And that confidence issue to get things wrong is not something that we instill in young girls in the same way that boys do have it. I don't know why, I'm not the educational psychologist as to why, we just know statistically that is the case. So if we know that young girls don't have the mentality of fail to learn, but boys do, I think it has to start something around there and getting it wrong. There's also some of the skill sets that I see that, and there may be like strategic skill sets that traditionally boys were given and girls weren't. And a really good example of this actually is chess. So I don't know if you ever had a chess club at school, but I mean, I didn't go to a great school, but there was even a chess club, even at my school. And the kids who went to that chess club were boys, and it was a very specific group of boys. And I wouldn't have been seen dead in chess club, right? Are you joking? And to my great shame, I was not at chess club, but that actually is a really fundamental skill in terms of strategic gameplay, in terms of learning, in terms of failing, in terms of learning what the moves are in order to do it again. And actually, that's a really early foundation of writing code. So it's things like that where we have to shift the mindset of what girls and boys are doing to get that like failure to, or get things wrong to learn. That I think is really important. And then in terms of like optionality and showing and getting girls to dream big about what they can do, we've just got to tell loads of different stories. I don't know about you, but I'm so fed up of seeing the same talking heads talking about like their success, and then we sneezed and we IPO'd and it's like you didn't. But also like I've heard your story, and I want to hear all the stories of all the people who are building in all the industries. And I want to have every little person, girl or boy, see themselves in that journey where they're like, oh my God, I was like that. Or that's my life. Or, and have like that feeling like that representative of them, including stories about how you failed. And I don't think we ever tell the stories about when things went wrong. And that just sets people up again for that like fear of getting it wrong and getting to the right answer. So I would love to learn more stories of more people, of what they're building and how they're doing it. I think if every little person saw themselves being represented in those stories, they'd be like, oh, I could do that. That's open to me too.
There is also just on touching on that point, we've mentioned a couple of times about the government focus on progressing the UK sort of AI and digital workforce, and you touched on the women in tech pieces. They are doing also a tech first scheme, which is going into school kid level to try and encourage people into sort of STEM subjects and tech based subjects as well. So potentially that might have an impact. Any other questions? Yeah.
Sorry, I'm not going to overtake the mic every time. But just to add to your question, based on when you said strategic, my brother is a coder, and my sister had a little girl, my niece, and when my brother's doing really, really well. He has a paper in Bristol University, and he teaches in Japan and stuff. And my sister wanted my niece to do the same. And what she did was she taught my niece about curiosity. So she was strategic in the way that she got her to draw things. My niece is a great artist from young. Got her to draw things and then got her to be curious into how does she make that into a cartoon, which then introduced my brother into teaching coding. And now my niece is 21 and lives in Japan, went to study there. But it was, my sister did it strategically by teaching her to be curious. And that's how she got into it, because we come from a family that, you know, if you tell us to do something, we're going to go against the grain. So she knew that that wouldn't work for my niece. But by teaching her to be curious, made her delve more into, okay, she likes drawing cartoons. How does she make her own cartoon?
Love that.
And then from that, she started networking, and the easiest network was my brother, who already teaches anime and coding and all the way. And then she got into it, and now she's going clear, if that makes sense. So curiosity, I think, is a good way.
And I think that is that touch there on ending on networking, which is a theme that we've had all the way through here, is a really nice place to end. So thank you for your questions. Thank you to Michelle for sharing.
Thank you.
And I hope you've enjoyed today. So please just join me in thanking Michelle.
For coming. Oh, I'm on. Can we just give a round of applause for Ruth as well, who did a fantastic job.
Thank you, Ruth.
Do feel free to hang around, have a chat, help yourself. There's plenty of food here, so do help yourselves. And thank you for coming. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Any other way, I swear she's destined for the screen. Closest thing to Michelle.